Welcome back to our next edition of the Real Estate Investor Series from Realty Consultants Property Management. I've got with me today Kirby Graves, who is actually one of our clients as well with Realty Consultants Property Management. And he's going to talk with us a little bit about some of the investments that he does. So, Kirby, if you could just introduce yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian. Yeah, I'm Kirby. I'm a real estate agent. I help people buy and sell properties as my day job, but also run an investment firm that invests in the triad market and real estate, all kinds of different types of real estate.
Gotcha. So, what really kind of got you into wanting to invest in real estate?
Well, I was always interested in real estate from a very young age because my dad actually had a couple rental properties. And I saw him, going to the houses, fixing things up, and saw him collecting the rent from people and that sort of thing. So I always had it in the back of my mind that it was a good way to make money. And so when I was, finishing up college and starting my other business that I had started, I just got more and more interested in real estate, started listening to podcasts and stuff like that to learn more about real estate investing. And so I've just been interested from a young age, and now it's just becoming more and more interesting to me as time goes by.
Gotcha. So, so would you say you mostly do buy and hold, long term income, some flip investments? What do you mostly dabble in?
Yeah, we've done a little bit of all of that, but for the most part, we're looking very, very long term. We want to hold our properties for basically forever. There's a few things like in our portfolio that's more of a short term plan, but for the most part, we're looking out like 20 years on our investments.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit why you would want to hold long term and why, when you say you've got it planned out for like 20 years, what's the benefits of that?
For us, we want to scale, so we want to get more properties. And if we're looking more short term, I feel like that causes a lot of issues where we're having to refinance, always having to acquire properties and that sort of thing. And our plan is to really, buy the properties, get a tenant in there, or raise the rents, or fix up the house and kind of get it really like brand new inside and ready to go, and then put it in for a long term. And there you can really take advantage of the depreciation and stuff that's on the tax side. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the reasons that we like to do it, that strategy.
Gotcha. So let's take a step back. So when you first got into this, do you remember your first real estate investment you did?
Yes, I can't forget it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first investment that I ever made was this little tiny house in High Point. It's like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and it was completely burned out. I mean, you could see straight through the siding. You could see straight through the floor. Some of the windows were completely missing, so it was in like horrible condition. And actually got into that property for like $24,000. So really, really cheap house. Bought it with seller financing, so the seller was the lender for me. So they acted as the bank, and I put about like $6,000 down, and then I started fixing up the house myself, hiring people when I could to do certain things and that sort of thing. And that one little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house took me like a year and a half to finally get it fixed up and finished. But man, did I learn a lot through the process.
If I remember correctly, I think you were going to flip that house. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I did end up flipping that house and selling it. So and that's one of the reasons I've learned to do long term because, flipping, you have to be a lot more exact with your numbers and that sort of thing. So on that project, like I said, bought it for about $24,000, but I put about $25,000 or $30,000 into it. So really only made about $5,000 on it. But really the main thing that I got from that was how much I learned. So
yeah, we try to tell people that all the time. If you're wondering if you should jump into it because you just don't know, that's the best way to learn. I mean, you can read books, listen to podcasts, and they're all great, but you're really not going to learn the tricks of the trade until you actually get into it. So,
yeah. And I listened to the podcast, I read the books for like 5 years. So absolutely, like I was to the point where I needed to just jump in. And I think that if you're probably listening to this podcast, you're probably or listen to this video, then you're probably at that point where you need to just jump in and do it.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second. Give us some ideas of some podcasts, some books, some things you've read that have helped you along the way.
The very first thing, anytime somebody asks me like, what should I read to get into real estate, I always tell people, read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that's really going to just help you understand finance in general and business in general. And I think that's a really solid foundation. If you understand the concepts of the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, then you're going to be successful, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I love that book. I give people the suggestion to read that book all the time because that really it's a foundational understanding of that really helps you understand from a business standpoint why it is you do things you do. Sacrifice, finance, all aspects of business. It's a fantastic book. So you talked a little bit about how you got into your first house with seller financing. What type of financing do you normally do with your properties in your portfolio?
Yeah, so we always at least ask the seller if they're willing to do seller financing. Not every seller is in the position where they can do seller financing, but it makes a lot of sense, especially if they have the property paid off and they're sitting on a lot of equity. But if we're not going the seller financing route, then we typically will work with like an investment bank. They're doing commercial loans, so they're typically only looking at rental properties. They wouldn't, give you a loan on your personal house. They would only give you a loan on an investment property. So we work with them. Typically, they're looking like 20 to 25% down, that kind of thing. They're going to make sure that the property cash flows. So that's one reason we like working with them, because they're analyzing the property and they're not going to lend on something that's not going to cash flow. So it's kind of like having somebody else, as a financial analyst on your team when you work with a lender like that. So.
Right. Gotcha. So I want to talk a little bit about the seller financing with our audience out there, because some people might not know what to look for, like you just mentioned. But when you go into a deal with somebody, are there any kind of questions you may ask the seller?
Yeah, so seller financing, one of the reasons we love it is because you can get extremely creative with it. And it's a way to make the deal work for pretty much everybody, right? So there's all kinds of things we ask them, mainly like, hey, what do you need the money for? Are you got something that you're going to purchase? Do you want the money right away? Or would it make more sense to you to try to save some money on taxes? Because if the seller does seller financing, there are some tax advantages to that for them. So it just really depends on where they're at. If they don't need the money, or if the taxes are a big issue to them, then they're definitely going to be a great person to do seller financing with. What I often find is that sellers are stuck on a particular term of the contract or a term of the loan that they're wanting to get out of it. Maybe it's they do have some money spent in their mind, more or less. Maybe they're looking to buy a beach house or something like that. Most of these people are retiring. They're trying to get out of the business. So if they're trying to buy something, then usually they need like a pretty big down payment, and that's the reason that they think they might need to sell it outright. But if you talk them through it, and if you're able to get them enough of money for a down payment to cover whatever they're looking to spend the money on, then often they're more open to doing the seller financing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I actually did one of those myself with a portfolio of properties, and I guess I would assume a lot of times you're going to find those kind of deals on portfolios, but I didn't even have to ask any questions. The guy actually came to me because he said, it was exactly like you said, he was looking for that tax advantage on the sale of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have one that we have with a seller, and it was two houses that he sold us. One of them needed some major repair. So when we got it, we did all the repairs to that house. And now we're at the point where we got a lot of equity in the property because we did all the repairs. We fixed it up. It's worth a lot more than it was when we started. And so we went back to him and said, hey, we're thinking about refinancing this property with a bank. And that means that we'd be paying you back, probably $60,000 or $70,000. And he said, whoa, 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 whoa. Please do not do that. He doesn't want us to pay him back fast because he's going to take a tax hit from that. So, yeah, so we, with that, we're going to work it out with him where we can keep some of the money that we owe him on the other house, and we're going to refinance one of the two houses.
Yeah, I did. That same thing happened to me when interest rates started ticking up. I was refinancing my entire portfolio. Part of it had to do with the seller financing piece of it. And I went back to him. I said, hey, look, I've got I've got an opportunity that I really need to take advantage of. And same thing, he didn't want to do that. I said, oh, I'll tell you what, if we can renegotiate the terms of the interest rate, then I think we can keep it going. So that's basically how we kept that piece of it together.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So tell me about your portfolio. Like how many properties you have, how many are long term, how many you plan on, if you even do any more buying flips.
Yeah. So I do a couple flips, but we're doing like one or two a year, just to have a little bit of extra income coming from that. Or if it's a property that we buy, we think it's going to be a good long-term hold, and then all of a sudden, a couple months later, we're like, we don't really like the property as much as we thought we did, then we might sell it. And then we've built our portfolio by buying portfolios. Okay. So we reach out specifically to investors that have multiple properties. They're trying to sell multiple properties at once. So we've built them up by building on portfolios. And often when you buy that, you got some winners and losers in there. Sure. And to get it across the finish line, sometimes you might have to buy a house that's not exactly the best, or you're only going to break even on. So a few of those that either are in areas that we want to hold for a long term or something like that, we'll spin them off and sell them out of the portfolio. And our focus is try to build a portfolio of properties that we really want to hold for long term because of the location, the size of the property, the neighborhood, all those type of things.
What are some of those things you look for? Like what are some criteria of a property that says I want to hold this for 20 years?
Well, the main thing is like the progress that's going on around the property. So we want to find a property that's what you call like in the path of progress. So it's kind of between an older area that's maybe getting gentrified or something like that. So there's a lot of investors in that area that are fixing up properties, or if they're in a really desirable location in terms of just like somewhere somebody likes to live. For example, we have a couple properties that are real close to Walker Avenue in Elam in Greensboro, and that corner there has a lot of cool shops and restaurants and bars that people like to visit, and it's literally walking distance from there. So that's an example of a property that we're going to hold that for a long, long time because you could just see that property being valuable indefinitely.
Yeah, and we've talked about in different segments, appreciation versus cash flow. But when you get into properties like that, you kind of get a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a great area. It's selling, the houses in that area are selling for a higher dollar per square foot than most of the areas in Greensboro. And like I said, it's just going to have it's always going to be easy to fill that house. That means this is going to reduce your amount of vacancy that you have because people want to live in that area. If you buy houses in an area that people don't really want to live in, or a rural house, then it's going to take you a lot longer to fill that house. And that, anytime the house is empty, it's going to cost you money.
Sure. So I think a lot of your portfolio is single family. Is that correct?
Yeah, the vast majority of what we have is single family. We have about 50 single family houses in our portfolio, and some of those are in kind of different partnerships and that kind of thing. Sure. But yeah.
So what are your thoughts on townhomes and condos?
I like townhomes and condos if you can get some kind of level of control out there. If you go out there and the HOA is in a mess and you see that the roofs need to be repaired and there's broken down cars in the parking lot and there's the dumpsters overflowing with trash, then you may want to stay away from them. But if you go in there and it's a great area, the the property's well taken care of, you look into the financials of the HOA and it's in good shape, then we love condos.
Okay.
The one thing that I would say is that you have to watch out for is the financing piece, because not every lender is willing to do what you would call a non-warrantable condo. Non-warrantable condos basically are condo complexes that are in big part owned by investors. Lenders only want to lend on, or most of your like residential type lenders only want to lend on condos that are warrantable, meaning that the vast majority of the complex is owned by owner occupants.
Gotcha. And I guess that's why it's tough sometimes for an owner occupant buyer to go into a condo area and try to purchase, and then they have a hard time getting financing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, on the residential side of things too, it does make it difficult for just your normal average home buyer to buy one of those. And think about that. If you're an investor and you need to sell a property, you need to liquidate something, then you want to have the biggest pool of buyers out there to be able to look at your properties. So there is some risk associated with just not being able to sell the property because, either people can't get financing or people, you just limit your pool of buyers because if it's non-warrantable, then not every person can go in that complex and buy.
Gotcha. I'm going to go out here and I may ask you a question that may hurt a little bit, but you'll probably like this anyway.
Okay.
So, biggest mistake you ever made in this business?
Oh man, the biggest mistake I think we've ever made is just not doing your due diligence, not talking to enough people. Like for example, the condo warrantable, non-warrantable thing. That's something I know now from experience because the second deal we ever did was for 5 condos. They're all non-warrantable condos. And we found out real quick when we tried to shop it around for lenders to try to refinance it that it was a difficult thing to get financed. So there's only a couple lenders really that are willing to do that. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned.
Yeah, so I mean, with our mistakes, we learn a lot from them. So as everybody can see, Kirby is just full of gold. He's got so many good things for us. But tell us, Kirby, one more thing. What would be one thing you would tell the audience out there if they were looking to do this, or they were maybe in it, but just kind of a novice? What's one main thing you could give them, one main nugget you'd like to give them?
I think for somebody that's just getting started, it makes a whole lot of sense to partner with somebody else that has more experience than you, or even like me and my business partner. We have about the same level of experience, but we bounce off of each other a lot. So we ask each other questions does this make sense for long term? Do you like this area? And we kind of knock stuff back and forth like that. And that's allowed us to avoid a lot of mistakes just because it's not just you thinking about that. You have to get different perspectives on things. And if you are going to work by yourself, I mean, you can reach out to your property manager. They can give you a good perspective. I mentioned before, it's good to get your lender's perspective on a property, see what they think about it. If your lender and your property manager is telling you it's not a good deal, then, that's probably a sign because they're going to get paid a commission to help you with that property. So if they think it's not going to be good for you, then most likely it could be a bad deal, and you should probably listen to that. So I think it's good when you're first getting started to have a solid team around you.
Yeah, I've heard that from so many investors. I mean, that is fantastic advice for anybody, and not just at the start, but like along the way, the whole time, having that team around you. Now, obviously, we do property management. So tell us about why it's so important to have good, strong property management working with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing is what do you value your time, and how much time do you have to dedicate to servicing your tenants. They are your customers essentially. So you want to make sure you give them good customer service. That way they stay in your property for a long time. That way you avoid turning the properties over. So if you're not going to be able to jump on things right away because maybe your day job doesn't allow you to step outside and take an hour phone call to get a plumber out there to the house, or if you're not able to go out there and do the repairs yourself, it makes a ton of sense to work with a property manager because they're going to be, always available for your tenants to call if they have complaints. If a pipe busts in the middle of the night, they'll respond right away, versus if you're doing it yourself, maybe you're at the beach out of town or something like that with your family trying to enjoy that time, and you get a call from a tenant, it's going to be a nightmare for you, especially if you have to leave your family vacation to go fix something at a property that you have. So for us, it's all about peace of mind. Peace of mind that we know that our tenants are being taken care of. Peace of mind that we're not going to have to get that call in the middle of the night to go fix something. And also having that person on our team to just say, hey, when we're looking to buy new properties, like, hey, how much is this going to get in rent? How much do you think we can increase the rent here? Because all those are really important to running a profitable, investment company.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you, Kirby. We all appreciate you. And you just gave us some great stuff today. But thank you for being with us, and look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yes, sir.